们就开始下午的课，是由演荣跟思怡法师用英语讲慧学概所。Let me change the battery.
Okay, that's good.
好，大众请起立。礼佛三问讯：一问讯，再问讯，三问讯。向两位授课法师问讯。阿弥陀佛。阿弥陀佛。师父好。
So did everyone have a good lunch? Yes. Yeah? Okay, so after that lovely piece of harmonica music, I'd like to follow through with just a short 5-minute session of relaxation. Just to let you digest a bit more and also to slowly get you back into the mood for listening to the Dharma. So if you get yourself into a comfortable position, okay, you can lean back onto the chair if you like, or you can sit straight. Yeah, just find yourself a comfortable position. Slowly close your eyes. Take off your glasses if you're wearing glasses or anything that might cause discomfort. So close your eyes in your own due course. Take in 3 deep breaths. With each breath, bring yourself back to the present moment. You are here now. You're not outside. You're here in this Dharma hall. Breathe and feel your body, starting from the crown of your head. If it is tense, relax. Let loose. There's nothing to fear here. You are safe. Start to feel your face, your ears. Relax those parts as well. slowly move your attention to your neck. Relax that part of our body that is always tense. Let it relax. Now move your attention to your shoulders. If it's still tense, take a deep breath, and as you breathe out, just visualize the tension going away with it. Now move the attention to the torso of your body, the front and the back. Just relax the muscles. Let the attention now move further down to the buttocks and your thighs. If it is tense, try to relax it. Let loose. Now, move the attention to your calves, the lower part of your legs. Feel the tension and let it go with each breath. Down to your feet and toes. Can you feel it? Bring your awareness to the extremities of your body. Relax. Forget about the world outside. Bring yourself to this present. And with each breath, just breathe naturally and let the body flow with the motion. Slowly draw your attention back to the breath. Deepen the breath to awaken the body. With each breath, invigorate yourself, preparing your mind and body for the Dharma this afternoon, for which you happily receive. With the first deep breath, bring your awareness back to the body. With the second deep breath, slowly open your eyes. With the third breath, awaken and make yourself more alert. You may need to stretch your neck a bit, move the head around, move the shoulders a little bit. Slowly awaken the body from the relaxed state. Maintain that relaxation, but also give rise to awareness and alertness. Okay, so that was not an attempt to make you fall asleep, so that we can ease our nerves. Usually after lunch, because you've eaten food, you tend to want to have a little siesta in the afternoon, but unfortunately the schedule for this afternoon is not a siesta, but a feast on the Dharma. So I hope that you can actually enjoy this afternoon, both this talk and more so the talk afterwards from one of our teachers. Now today we're talking about wisdom, the unique practice of Buddhism. Now I know that for some people here, you're all well seasoned in the practice of Buddhism, so this topic may be considered at your level. But there are also some people here who might be relatively new to Buddhism or are still looking around and trying to have a taste of what it's like. So for this particular talk, I'd like to first set the bearing of where it sits within the practice of Buddhism from the perspective of a beginner and also an intermediate and advanced practitioner. So for a beginner, what we hope that you get out of this today is the importance of wisdom and the difference of wisdom in Buddhism as opposed to what you would find in the Oxford Dictionary. So the definition of wisdom in Buddhism is quite different to what you would understand it to be through the normal English language. And similarly, if you were learning in Chinese, to also bear in mind that the word 智慧 is different to its normal Chinese meaning. In Buddhism, we have a specific meaning for true wisdom. So as a beginner, we'd like for you to, if you can't get more of the heavy stuff, at least be aware that when we talk about wisdom in Buddhism, it has a specific meaning, and that makes it so important to all Buddhists. Now for the intermediate practitioner, we hope that you can actually solidify your understanding of what wisdom is and look towards the practice that is to come and consider, have you started on the practice of wisdom? How can I start my practice of wisdom? And then for the advanced practitioners, we want you to be able to compare where you are at as opposed to what the teachings have actually outlined are the stages for practicing to develop wisdom. So then you can see, have I actually started? Am I really that advanced of a practitioner? Or have I been misleading myself? Now you have to be honest with yourself in the practice of Buddhism. Otherwise, you might get lost, and because of your dishonesty to yourself, you're really doing a disservice to yourself. I mean, the teachers can only help you so far, but you need to be honest about where you are at, and therefore where you start to continue on. Now from this teaching, we've drawn heavily from a book by Master In Sun, and it's called The Synopsis on the Practice of Wisdom in Buddhism. Now this particular teaching is actually very lengthy, and we can't cover the whole teaching in this short 2-hour period. However, just to give you an idea of the content of this teaching, he goes through various aspects of wisdom, from what you might consider to be very ordinary, and just discussing the multiple terms, the multiple categories of wisdom. Now for a beginner, and even for seasoned practitioners, that's very important to understand these differences, because as you start to read many different texts, different translators will use different terms. So you need to be able to reconcile this term actually refers to wisdom. And you also need to be able to understand, oh, this term refers to the development of wisdom at which stage. So even though you might think, this is a bit boring, it's got nothing to do with the practice, it's actually very involved with the practice, particularly at the earlier stages where you're still reading, where you're still accumulating your knowledge. You need to be aware of all of these so-called technical terms. Now, in this particular teaching, he also then goes into a great amount of detail about the actual practice. How do we actually cultivate so that we can develop wisdom as the Buddha intended? Now that's the important thing, to develop the wisdom that the Buddha intended that we develop. And then he goes on to tell us what the marks and the signs of this attainment are. And this is very useful for us because we can compare with our own experience to see, have we actually experienced that mark? Have we been able to really attain these signs? Because if we have, then it's like check, 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 we're on the right track. But if we have not, then we need to really start to think again. Where are we at? And how do we get back onto the right track? So in all of Venerable In Sun's teachings, there's a lot of so-called academic research behind it, but the whole purpose is to help us with our practice. And when we read his work, we have to be able to draw from that practice and not just treat it as a book, as an academic piece. If we can't learn from his teachings and make it part of our practice, then in a sense, we've read his book, but we've really gained nothing from it. And the only loss is to ourselves, not to the Master, because he's already been there, done that, and he's now coming back to tell us, how do you get there? How do you do it? So this particular text, Hui Xue Gai Shuo, the synopsis on the practice of wisdom in Buddhism, even though we can't cover the whole text in these 2 hours, it is being translated in full into English, and the publication that you will be able to find the translation is in Dharma Garden. So that's actually a US Buddhist magazine. So the actual website is down there, although I'm not sure how you're going to get the Chinese into the URL. But if you do a Google search on Dharma Garden or Jade Buddha Temple, Texas, then it should actually bring you to their webpage. So currently the publication is still publishing the translation of the 3 Essentials, which is the talk that I covered last year. And this particular teaching on wisdom will begin publication in the November issue. So over the next years, if you are interested, then you can go to this publication. It's bi-monthly, and then you can get the full teaching from Venerable In Sun. So for this session, we would like to explore just these 3 particular aspects, And in particular, we want to look at the 4 key characteristics of true wisdom. So this is to tell us what we need to possess in our wisdom in order for it to qualify as the wisdom, the true wisdom that the Buddha is trying to teach us. And then, after understanding what these 4 characteristics are, of course we need to understand, how do we develop it? What are the stages, the sequential steps to the practice? And that we will be covering today as well. But at the very start of the talk, we would like to look at why is wisdom so important for a Buddhist to understand. And we need to understand this importance because if you recall Venerable Tangzi's talk earlier, he mentioned that with faith you develop your interest and your desire. And then with that desire and want, you then put it into action and you actually work towards it. So you have that diligent effort. So that is why we want to start off by looking at wisdom. Why is it so important to us Buddhists? And we want you to develop your faith and your desire to cultivate that wisdom. So that gives you your impetus and your driving force to move forward. Now, if we take a broad perspective of religion in general, each religion has their unique element. And for Buddhism, what really sets it apart from all the other religions is undoubtedly the practice of wisdom. Now, this is not to say that the other religions do not have any element of wisdom at all. We're not saying that. But for most other religions, they tend to focus more on compassion, charitable deeds, or faithful devotion to their Messiah, to their God, or whatever. In Buddhism, the focus is on the development of wisdom.
So you may think, well, the other religions of India also focus on wisdom. So why is Buddhism's wisdom so unique? Well, before his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, Prince Siddhartha had studied under different great masters of his era, and mastering their teachings, he realized that their highest achievements were still inadequate for the purpose of full liberation. Rather, their achievements are really the results of attaining the virtues of worldly meditation. These meditative states are very deep states of meditation and are not easily attained by the average practitioner. But nonetheless, they still fall within the realm of the mundane world. Therefore, according to Buddhist teachings, the enlightenment that the other Indian religions claim to achieve cannot be a result of the perfect of true wisdom. For example, Prince Siddhartha has studied under the renowned teacher Arada Kalama. This teacher believed that what he had accomplished and realized was the ultimate state of nirvana. Yet, after Prince Siddhartha had attained that so-called nirvana, he assessed it carefully and concluded that there were just the deep meditative states of no perception and neither perception or non-perception. The meditative states of no perception is the cause for attaining rebirth in the heaven of no perception, which belongs to the realm of form. The meditative states of neither perception or non-perception is the deepest meditative states within the three realms. It corresponds to the highest heaven in the formless realm. In both of these meditative states, the mind's consciousness is said to be inactive, which often misleads the practitioner to think they have ended their defilements because they cannot perceive any activity of the mind. So the meditative states of no perception is the cause for attaining rebirth in the heaven of no perception, which belongs to the realm of form. The meditative states of neither perception or non-perception is the deepest meditative states within the three realms. It corresponds to the highest heaven in the formless realm. Here is a depiction of the three realms. So, the meditative states of no perception can bring you to this point. And the meditative states of neither perception and non-perception can get you there. In both of these meditative states, the mind's consciousness is said to be inactive, which often misleads the practitioner to think they have ended their defilements because they cannot perceive any activity of the mind. After attaining to these states, Prince Siddhartha knew that this was not nirvana because when the strength and influence of the meditation diminished, countless defilements began to rise again. Just like the common Chinese saying, wildfires do not kill off vegetation. Once the spring breeze comes blowing, all is green again. So this so-called nirvana was not the nirvana that Prince Siddhartha was looking for. Fortunately for us, Prince Siddhartha continued his search for true nirvana, and he found it using wisdom. So even though other religions may be able to subdue or eliminate a portion of defilements, as well as attaining extremely profound and sublime states that resembles the state of liberation, they are still unable to remove the roots of the problem because of lack of true insights or wisdom.
Now, in Buddhism, wisdom forms the dividing line between an ordinary being and a sage. And a sage is what we would refer to as an enlightened being. Someone with at least, if not full enlightenment, there's partial enlightenment. So, that's why in his text, The Way to Buddhahood, Venerable Yingsun explains that wisdom, or prajna, is what distinguishes an enlightened being from a worldly being. Now, at the present moment, I will honestly say I'm still a worldly being. There may be some enlightened beings in amongst us, and I hope you will make yourself known. But for our purposes here today, we need to know that prajna, or true wisdom, marks the realm that is beyond our mundane world. So this means that all the virtues of this supra-mundane world and the different types of sages that Buddhism talks about, from the Sravaka practitioners to the Pratyeka practitioners to the Bodhisattvas and the Buddhas, of course, all these type of sages are only possible because they possess this prajna, this true wisdom.
So, just like our citizenship requires a test and interview before we become an American, Australian, New Zealander. I haven't introduced myself to you guys. I'm from New Zealand, that's why I put New Zealand. I'm originally born in Hong Kong, but I migrate to New Zealand when I'm 14. Okay. If we want to become a sage, a citizen of the transcendental world, we need to pass the prajna test.
So hopefully you can understand where prajna or wisdom falls now and why it's so important in the Buddhist practice. Essentially, our goal is to perfect this wisdom. It's to attain it for ourselves. Not just to admire the fact that I follow the Buddha and he has this wisdom, because the Buddha doesn't want us to do that. The Buddha wants us to also be able to awaken and develop this wisdom that he has awakened to already. And once we firmly understand and believe that wisdom, in the Buddhist sense, is what we really need to chase after, then we will put it into action. And with this wisdom, we will be able to attain liberation, and we can even attain Buddhahood, just like the Buddha. Now, in a worldly sense, if you were to open up the dictionary, wisdom tends to relate to knowledge or understanding. So, for someone, if we say that they've got great wisdom, great knowledge, you'd expect them to be able to recite the whole encyclopedia or be able to tell you everything from the encyclopedia. And that is well and good. There's a lot of effort that needs to be put in to do that. But from the Buddhist perspective, having a vast knowledge is not wisdom. So if you recall back to this morning's talk by the Venerable, he also mentions that you don't need to learn a lot in order to gain liberation. Because in Buddhism, it's this wisdom that leads to liberation, not having vast knowledge. In Buddhism, wisdom is actually referring to the ability to analyze, to investigate, and to discern phenomena to the point where you fully understand phenomena at both the conventional worldly level and also at the ultimate level, the transcendental level. Now in Buddhism, this ultimate level is actually beyond duality. So there is no relativity to speak of things. There's no language, there's no concepts. It's beyond duality. However, in teaching it to us, we are within the mundane realm, so we have to use language, we have to use words to express it. But bear in mind that the actual state, the actual ultimate state that wisdom can bring us to goes beyond language and description. Now with true wisdom, we can awaken to this ultimate truth. And so it's actually something that we experience. It's not just something you know.
Yeah, it is sort of like a dream state. Even if you can explain to others what you have dreamt about, only you can fully experience what it was like.
Now, even though true wisdom is beyond description in Mahayana Buddhism, true wisdom must possess 4 special qualities. Otherwise, it is not the wisdom that the Buddha is trying to help us to develop. Now, what are these 4 qualities? The first quality is that faith and wisdom functions as one. The second is that there is a merger between wisdom and great compassion. The third is that there is a balance between tranquility, and this tranquility refers to a meditative state of tranquility and wisdom. And the fourth quality is the sameness of the truth and wisdom.
Yes, it is important that we understand and check that these qualities are present. So when we talk about wisdom, it is not completely unrelated to faith. Generally speaking, at the start, a practitioner must rely on faith to develop wisdom. You must believe in it before you invest time and effort to develop it. But after a while, we actually need wisdom to help faith to become stronger and steadfast. This happens by way of verification. That means as we progress, our wisdom develops and proves that our initial faith was right. And so we have even more faith. Do you understand? So the two are interrelated and mutually supportive and encompassing. They progress hand in hand until final faith and wisdom become unified and functions as one. The Bodhisattva Manjusri, as described in the Mahayana Sutras, is representative of great wisdom. Manjusri not only expounds and reveals the profound meaning of the true nature of all phenomena, but also emphasizes the encouragement to develop faith in the Mahayana and make the Bodhi vow to attain Buddhahood. That is why Manjusri is called the teacher of the Buddhas. What Manjusri's practice shows us is that one should make the Bodhi vow, which means to have right faith in the Mahayana, and cultivate wisdom to strengthen that vow. Only in this way we can great Bodhi can be attained. This great Bodhi is the state where faith and wisdom function as one in the Mahayana. Faith and wisdom are not only a Mahayana thing. In the Sravakayana, there are faith and wisdom-based practitioners, 心行人, 法行人. That means some Sravakayana practitioners at the start may be inclined to faith-based practices, while the others are inclined to Dharma-based practices. Nevertheless, once these practitioners attain enlightenment, they accomplish pure and true faith in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and the noble precepts. These are the four aspects of realized faith. This faith in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and noble precepts is indestructible because of wisdom. This is the point where faith and wisdom operate as one in the Sravakayana. Wisdom is able to solidify our faith because you understand the objects clearly and knows its true value, function, and usefulness. Thus, you have confidence and unshakable faith in it. So this is the first quality of true wisdom.
Now we look at the second quality. True wisdom is also where extensive and great compassion and profound wisdom merge as one. Now the wisdom of these Sravakayana practitioners is inclined to focus on experiencing life rationally. Now this can be explained from the following example. If a Sravakayana practitioner sees people arguing, they would reflect rationally and conclude, this is suffering, just as the Buddha taught. They are less likely, their first reaction is less likely to be, how can I help to resolve this argument and bring happiness back to all parties? Now this is the meaning behind experiencing life rationally. There is nothing wrong with this rationality. So we're not trying to say one's better, one is worse. We're just trying to say this is the general situation and tendency. So remember, there is nothing wrong with living life rationally, but from the Mahayana perspective, such rationality does not develop compassion extensively as you would in the Bodhisattva practice. And as a result, after attaining liberation, it is actually more difficult for Sravakayana practitioners to make great compassionate vows and to extensively work on liberating sentient beings and accomplishing countless virtues. So this is sort of like, I don't know, have you ever had to deal with the tax office? Yeah? So sometimes you might get lucky and the person you're dealing with is actually quite reasonable, even friendly. So they might be a bit more flexible and give you a bit of leeway. But then sometimes you might be unlucky and you get a really strict and staunch tax officer that goes by the book. Now both of them are just doing their job. However, for the person who tends to go by the book, it's just their personality being very strict, and so sometimes they can't bring themselves to give you that flexibility. And that's what we're trying to say here. When your practice leads you to live a life that is very rational and doesn't help you to develop compassion, you can end up in this type of a situation where later on down the track, if you want to develop compassion, it might actually be not that easy. So just bear this in mind. And that is why we're now on this second quality, where there should be a merger between wisdom and great compassion. So that was from the Sravakayana perspective. Now, on the other hand, the Bodhisattvas can attain this true wisdom because they do possess deep-set sympathy and great vows to practice compassion even after they thoroughly awaken to the true nature of all dharmas. Now what this means is that after realizing the truth, they actually utilize their wisdom to engage in deeds to benefit others. Now through this process, their loving kindness and compassion actually becomes even more widespread, and their wisdom, as a result, also becomes more and more profound. Now in the Mahayana Sutras, it is said that when a bodhisattva's compassion and compassionate deeds are insufficient, and they eagerly seek the wisdom of enlightenment, the majority of them will fall into the trap of self-liberation. So what this means, falling into the trap of self-liberation, is that they gain only the result, the fruition of the Sravakayana. In such circumstances, they have forgotten the underlying meaning of the Mahayana's teachings on prajna, which emphasizes the union of wisdom and compassion, and created obstacles to their progression on the path to Buddhahood. So this is what is actually said in the sutras, the Mahayana Sutras. Now we can also think of compassion in another way. It is a very important counterbalancing item. Compassion accords with being selfless, because when we do things out of compassion, our aim is to benefit others. There is no self involved in there. It's not for our own self-benefit. We want to do it purely to make others happy, to relieve others from their suffering. Pure knowledge, on the other hand, can potentially give rise to arrogance, which is a form of self-attachment. Therefore, when you're practicing wisdom and trying to develop your wisdom, as wisdom grows, as your knowledge grows, there is the potential for arrogance to also develop. So a self-attachment can also start bubbling away. Hence, in the Mahayana, there is this need to have great compassion to counterbalance that potential pitfall. Now, it can counteract arrogance by helping our minds and our hearts to open up. And when compassion becomes boundless, then arrogance, the so-called self, is actually completely melted away. And thus it is important that perfect wisdom includes the quality of great compassion. This is the second quality that true wisdom must possess.
Now, let's look at the third quality. When studying the Mahayana practices, if there is a bias towards meditation, such that tranquility of the mind is strong and wisdom is weak, or if the bias is towards wisdom, so wisdom is strong and tranquility is weak, both situations are undesirable and cannot lead to the attainment of true wisdom. When the wisdom of discerning and decision-making is strong and the tranquility is insufficient, this is like a candle in the wind. Even though the lights can illuminate, but it flickers and cannot illuminate things steadily. Moreover, it can be extinguished easily. Meditation is like a clear lampshade that can block the wind and allow candle to burn steadily and illuminate things more clearly. On the other hand, if the skill of meditation is very deep and the strength of wisdom is weak, this is also not the right path in Buddhist practice. This is because deep meditation can give rise to a unique form of stillness that results in an extremely sublime experience where the body and mind is filled with the sense of freedom, bliss, rapture, and joy. While experiencing such a wonderful state, one can easily become enchanted and contented and, I think I just stay there. Thus, you actually create an obstacle to seeking and realizing wisdom. That is why the scriptures often mention that very deep states of meditation actually do not accord with wisdom and is unable to bring forth awakening. Well, I have some stories to share with you. In the past, I remember when I'm small, I saw a newspaper and it has a big page talking about a professor. He jumped off the cliff. Actually, my dad told me that was his friend. He is a professor and he practiced meditation, but without really understand the Buddhist knowledge. So maybe he just finds someone to practice the meditation, but not really having the right steps or teachings of what he should do. So he become a bit crazy. So he jumped off the cliff. And it's very sad. He takes a few years to recover from it. And after that, he become a Christian. So I mean, like he wants to be a Buddhist and he's practicing meditation. But at the end, how sad, the story ends. I mean, yeah, so like he can't get to the correct path at the beginning. So have the true, this Dharma in, for us to understand is very important. The right view is very important. And also, in my temple, someone asked me, they say, "Oh, Venerable, I had experience. Or when I meditate, I see Buddha talking to me all the time," and I was like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "Oh, okay." Really, I mean, when we meditate, we may, have connection with Buddhas, but don't get attached to it. For us as beginners, we should learn more, like to understand what Buddha is trying to say to us, and have a very safe, practice stage to back us up. Don't just fall to the very weird path in the beginning. So yeah, this is why we have this talk.
Okay, so on a lighter note, after that example of the professor jumping off the cliff, in this issue about how deep meditative states can actually be an obstruction, I want to ask, has anyone been to Tokyo Disney Sea? Yeah? Oh, well, I have. But not as a Buddhist nun. That would look a bit weird. I went to Tokyo Disney Sea quite a while ago with some friends. And what happened was we had planned to go on every single ride. So we got up early and we got ourselves to the front of the line in as soon as the park opened. However, we got to a particular ride and it was so enjoyable. After we got off, we thought, let's do it again. So we went to line up. And just like Disneyland here, the lines are quite long. So we went to line up again, and then again, and then again. And before we knew it, we ran out of time. So we actually didn't fulfill what we intended, and we missed out on quite a few of the rides. So when you enter into these very deep, enchanting states of meditation, that can actually happen. You get so absorbed in the sensations that are completely beyond what you will experience in the normal human day. The joys we talk about, the joys of childhood, the joys of whatever. In these meditative states, the joys and sensations you experience can actually be so enchanting that you just want to stay there. And when you stay there, there's the trap. You forego the further, the even more sublime and more miraculous joys that wisdom can actually offer. It's because we still don't even understand, we haven't even tasted, the joys of liberation that wisdom can bring, but we get too caught up in these deep states of meditation. That is why this third aspect requires that we must have a proper balance between tranquility, which is a state of meditation, and the cultivation of wisdom.
So, and this can happen with just as an example we already talked about, with the deep meditation, it becomes a very alluring temptation, and some even mistaken it for nirvana. Along the path of practice, there will be stages where one focuses more on wisdom and then on meditation. But ultimately, the two must be in good balance. This balance between wisdom and tranquility is attained at a very profound level of Bodhisattva path. Nagarjuna says, Bodhisattvas of the seventh bhumi called the stage of equilibrium between meditation and wisdom. Have meditation and wisdom that is balanced. Only then do they attain through understanding of the true regarding non-origination. At this point, they can penetrate deeply into non-origination and will no longer regress from the Mahayana. Even though perfect balance is attained at the seventh bhumi, we will still need to bear this in our mind for our practice now. So this is the third quality of true wisdom.
Lastly, we come to the fourth quality of true wisdom, Now, when a practitioner attains the wisdom that realizes the profound truth relating to the nature of all dharmas, this is the arising of true wisdom. Now, this state is conventionally described with the duality of subject, which is the wisdom that can realize, and the object, which is the truth that is to be realized. However, when we experience this state where true wisdom realizes the truth, it actually transcends all duality. Therefore, when a practitioner's true wisdom arises, they experience the sameness of wisdom and the principle of the truth. The two become indistinguishable and inseparable. Just like what is said in the Avatamsaka Sutra, in the state of realization, there is no wisdom as subject that realizes the truth, and no truth as the object to be realized. Now, this is like drinking water. So it's not cold, I'm thinking back to Australia. It's winter in Australia. It's very hot outside. And here I have a wonderful drink that can actually cool yourself down and refreshen yourself. So now I'm telling you, this is very cooling and refreshing. So you know it's cooling and refreshing, but what does that mean? What does cooling and refreshing mean? You will not really know until you drink it. When you drink it, you will fully be able to understand why I say this is very cooling and refreshing. And at that point, your understanding of cooling and refreshing merges with your experience. So you then be able to experience through the various sensations of drinking the water. You fully experience it. That experience is actually beyond words. But in order to relay that message, to convey that message, we do come up with words. So this is just like when you're listening to the Dharma. You know, Buddha taught us about the principles of emptiness, non-origination, or cause and effect, and so forth. This is knowing, but we haven't experienced it yet. So, when you actually drink the water, you fully appreciate it. When you actually attain to this wisdom that is described as emptiness, non-origination, and so forth, you actually taste and experience wisdom for yourself. So your knowledge of what is cool and refreshing, your knowledge of emptiness, merges with your experience to affirm and complete your understanding. Do you understand what we're trying to say? So there is a difference, and that is why this fourth quality refers to when wisdom, true wisdom arises, your knowledge of it, that principle, the doctrine of the truth, merges with your actual experience to make you fully aware of it. It makes it complete. It makes your learning of that complete. So faith, compassion, meditation, or tranquility, and the sameness with the principle of the truth are the four qualities that the Mahayana wisdom must possess. So when you're looking at this, you need to think, if I'm developing my Mahayana wisdom, which of these qualities do I possess already? Which of these qualities do I need to put effort towards? And which of these qualities had I not known before and now need to make up stride for? Now among them, the first, faith and wisdom functioning as one. The third, balance between tranquility and wisdom. And the fourth, sameness of truth and wisdom. These can also be found in the Sravakayana practice. Only the merger of wisdom and compassion is found in the Mahayana definition of true wisdom. So that is an important point to understand and to keep in mind. So compassion, you may think, is just a charitable act, but it's actually a very important part of the Mahayana practice. It's indispensable in a sense. So you should be able to understand, and we hope that you will be able to see, that the Mahayana's prajna is not an abstract notion of wisdom that is hard to grasp, or something that is just so vague you don't know what it is. It's not just something that distinguishes, even though some texts will say you need to analyze, you need to investigate. Wisdom in the Mahayana is not just something that distinguishes, and it certainly is not a biased and unsympathetic type of rationality. Rather, it possesses deep faith, true faith, right faith, and great compassion, profound tranquility, and a clarity of mind. It is actually fully imbued with spiritual life. Now that is why in the Mahayana practice, wisdom not only realizes the truth, it also embodies countless virtues such as compassion, morality, diligence, and so forth. So wisdom in the Mahayana is actually multifaceted. There are many aspects to it, and we need to recognize these qualities properly. So, we have looked at wisdom and its importance in Buddhism, and we've also covered the qualities of wisdom. Now, we also know that in Buddhism, what makes you a sage is wisdom. And given that wisdom is such a treasure for all Buddhists, how do we go about developing it? How do we go about becoming a sage? And I think we'll leave that for another 10 minutes. We'll break now. Yeah?
Okay, let's have a break and enjoy the Dongguan. Okay. 好，各位请就坐，我们再继续好吗？好。
Okay, so we'll continue from where we left off, and now we'll be delving into the nitty-gritty of how do I become a sage? How can I develop this wisdom that the Buddha wanted us to develop? Now again, just to remind you, we're drawing from Venerable Ying Sun's teachings and guidance. And what he teaches is that to develop wisdom and attain enlightenment, the foundation lies in the three wisdoms. And these three wisdoms are the sequential practices of learning the Dharma, contemplating the Dharma, and practicing the Dharma. And here the term Dharma refers to the Buddha's teachings, and then slowly it progresses. When you're at the stage of practicing the Dharma, that teaching should then become merged with the truth that the Buddha is teaching us. Now in the Theravada teachings, the three wisdoms are also embodied, and these can be found in the 4 preliminary factors for entry into sagehood. And these 4 factors are associating with wise teachers, listening to the righteous Dharma, contemplating the Dharma properly and thoroughly, practicing the Noble Eightfold Path to attain Nirvana. In the Mahayana, the 3 wisdoms can be expanded into the 10 Dharma practices, which are 1. Copying the sutras, 2. Making offerings to the sutras, 3. Giving or introducing the sutras to others, 4. Listening attentively when others recite the teachings, 5. Reading the sutras, 6. Upholding the teachings, 7. Properly elaborating on the sutras to others, 8. Reciting the sutras, 9. Contemplating and discerning the teachings, and 10. Practicing, putting it into practice. So this is a chart we've drawn together to try and show you how they marry up. So you have the 3 wisdoms on one side. So when we just talk about 3 wisdoms, learning, contemplation and practice, you might think, well, what does it entail? If you draw up a chart like this, it can actually help you to expand your understanding. So bear in mind, in the talks over these few days, you will see a lot of charts and diagrams and tables. This is a practice, a skill that we are taught in Buddhist college to help us develop the skill to be able to study the Dharma when we're studying on our own. So I would also encourage you, when you're studying the teachings, to also try and draw up tables and charts to see whether you can actually graphically put sense to a whole bunch of texts. And you can slowly then draw in all different other texts and what they're teaching to see if you can actually see how different texts should fit together in the whole scheme of things. So this is a skill that you should also try and develop even though you're not at Buddhist college. So, from this table, you can have a look and see clearly how things should be paired with one another.
We can see that the first 2 factors and the first 8 Dharma practices belong to wisdom of learning. This means that in the learning stage, what is involved includes listening to the scriptures, reading and reciting the scriptures, explaining the scriptures to others, and so on. In other words, these practices rely on association with wise teachers and a medium of language. Here, we learn from wise teachers or from written material. The material must be related to Dharma, such as accumulating knowledge of different methods of practice, the precepts, meditation, and so forth. Most important is that the teachings we learn should accord with the 3 Dharma seals of impermanence, selflessness, and nirvana. If your study of the Dharma does not accord with the 3 Dharma seals, then your wisdom of learning will not be complete, no matter how broad your knowledge becomes. When we learn from wise teachers and put in effort to study the Dharma properly, through the application of the teachings into our daily lives, it should start to bring forth a positive change in our way of thinking and behavior. Over time, we should be able to observe the self-purification of our mind and become more peaceful and calm. These are the signs indicating whether our learning is on the right track. So, even though the wisdom of learning is the beginning stage in the cultivation of wisdom, learning the Dharma requires effort and a level of application in order to realize its benefits. How extensive does this learning have to be, you may wonder? Well, the Bodhisattva's 4 great vows include one that says, Dharma practices are countless, I vow to learn them all. This is Mahayana's spirit of learning.
Now, as we go about building up our foundation of learning, after a while, you should be able to progress into the wisdom of contemplation. And you start to contemplate the teachings. Here, contemplation may seem a bit vague. How do we go about contemplating the teachings? If someone asked you, what is it? How do you do it? Will you be able to tell them? You need to ask yourself, if I was asked right here and then, I walk out on the street and someone goes, you're a Buddhist. Tell me, how do I contemplate the teachings? You really need to then reflect on yourself and say, yes, how do I do it? Now, fortunately for us, Venerable Ing Sun provides us with a clear instruction. So you just have to remember this answer and you can tell anybody on the side of the street. Now, this wisdom of contemplation requires us to make a very conscious effort to fully understand the principles, the logic and reasoning behind the teachings. That means we need to know their purpose and so on. This stage moves beyond language. We go beyond the barrier of language and we start to delve deep into the underlying meaning and purpose of the teachings. So we don't take the teachings for its face value. When you read something, you think, okay, I know it. But how deeply do you know it? This is where the practice of contemplation comes into play. Now here, Venerable Ing Sun points out that we investigate the teachings based on the ultimate truth. This is because not all sentient beings have the capacity to learn directly, to penetrate directly into the ultimate truth. And so the Buddha used provisional teachings as a preliminary measure. Thus, within the corpus of Buddhist teachings we have today, it is certain that it will include both provisional and ultimate teachings. In the stage of contemplation, we use the ultimate truth as the standard of measure to identify which teachings are provisional and which teachings are advanced and referring to the ultimate. Now, teachings belonging to the ultimate truth that can be used as a standard of measure can include the 3 Dharma seals, the law of dependent arising, no self, emptiness, and so on. So these types of doctrines are what we call directing us straight to the ultimate truth, and we can use these as our standard of measure when we're gauging all the teachings we come across. Now, these were also what the Buddha had stated himself in many of the teachings and said that these are the transcendental truth. However, we ourselves must have a proper understanding of these truths, of these doctrines, in order to be able to apply them properly in our contemplation. So sometimes the problem is not with the doctrine, the problem is with our understanding of the doctrine. So there's a difference there. We need to make sure our understanding of these doctrines are proper, then we can apply them in our contemplation practice. Otherwise, our conclusions are likely to be flawed. Now, this skill of identifying provisional and ultimate teachings will become more and more important as you progress in your Dharma practices. It is an important tool and guide when you start to build up your own library of Dharma books and teachings, so you can also know which ones belong to which category. Now, for example, in many of the sutras, particularly you'll find in the Prajna Sutras, you'll find that there are extravagant praises that make that particular sutra sound like it is the king of all sutras. So you'll sometimes see the praises saying, even if you just memorize a few words from this text, it will give you countless merits compared to making dana to the whole universe for millions and gazillions of lifetimes. So then you'll think, whoa, this must be the king of sutras. But the problem is, there isn't just one sutra that says that. There's a lot of sutras that says that. So you kind of think, oh, which one really is king? Now we need to understand that these praises actually have a function. They're not just there to, make the sutra look pretty. They do have a function for encouraging the target audience to actually learn and study and practice that particular sutra. However, we need to contemplate even further. In an ultimate sense, is there really such a thing as the king of all sutras? Now, in all the teachings of the Buddha, there is an intended audience, and thus, to that particular audience, this sutra is king. It suits me, it works for me. It is the king of all sutras. I fully believe in it. I fully understand why that praise is as such. But in our contemplation practice, we should try to go beyond these expedient elements and all this marketing glitz and glamour, as important as it is. We need to figure out what Buddha intended for each particular teaching, and thus how to use it properly. You can see this in the commentaries from the great masters in the past. When they discussed and debated on the teachings, the discussion and the debate was focused on the logic and the principles behind the teachings, and they generally ignored all this praise, because they know that it's actually just an expedient means. The truth, the thing we really need to figure out is the principle and the logic behind the teachings. So we should follow in the example of these ancient great masters when we undertake the wisdom of contemplation. And moreover, in our modern day, everyone seems to have their own blog. So they can put everything and anything up on the web, and sometimes it looks quite legitimate. However, there are some rotten apples out there, and you really need to use this contemplation to have a proper standard of measure to be able to help you to decipher what I can believe in and what I should discard. So that's why it's important to engage in a lot of deep contemplation regarding the teachings. So in summary, the practice of contemplating the Dharma should develop our understanding regarding the principles of the teachings, their purpose, function, target audience, limitations, and so forth. Now this will help us to understand which teachings can help us to remedy what problems at what stage of our practice. It can also help us to know when do we undertake this practice? Where are we at? Where is our progression? Similarly, by developing this wisdom of contemplation and actually understanding the different texts and what their purposes are, it helps us to recommend what is suitable to our friends. If someone came and asked us, "Oh, I'm interested in Buddhism," are you going to throw them everything and anything? Or are you going to give them a structured introduction? Because that makes a difference to whether they can actually enter into this study of the Buddhism properly, or whether they get so overwhelmed they think, I'll go and watch a movie instead. So this is a very important tool for your own practice and for how you can then share this knowledge with others. Now, after learning and contemplating, the next stage is the wisdom of practice. Regarding the wisdom of practice, Venerable Yingsun provides what I regard as an extremely lucid and clear step-by-step instruction. Hopefully we can do it justice in the following explanation. Now, if anything is left out or if you have any queries or are left in a bit of a blur, I take full responsibility for that. That is probably my inability to explain it to you. But I can definitely say that Venerable Yingsun's teachings, when you delve into it, it is very clear and very reliable. Practice here specifically refers to the cultivation of wisdom. That is, the realization of the truth, or the realization of emptiness. So often you will hear people will say, you have to practice, you have to practice. You need to understand in what context they're referring to. In this particular context, referring to wisdom, the cultivation and development of wisdom, when we talk about practice, it specifically means to practice with an aim of realizing emptiness, fully understanding emptiness. Now, this practice requires the power of concentration. It requires a certain level of tranquility of the mind, which can only be attained through the practice of meditation. So, in the practice of wisdom, we need to cultivate both samadhi and vipassana. So we need to cultivate both tranquility and insight. Now, for those who do not like meditation, and I have to admit, I'm one of them, I have to give you some bad news. You can't avoid it. If you want to develop wisdom, you can't avoid the practice of meditation. Similarly, for those who love meditation, a small warning. Remember that meditation is a very important tool, but it is not the goal. Don't get that mixed up. Don't get the goal mixed up for the expedient means. Now, due to time constraints, the following part of the talk will focus on the steps in the practice of cultivating insight. So what this means is we've assumed that you've all undertaken meditation practices following your meditation teacher, and you're all very well practiced and you've attained tranquility. That's our starting point. So just so you get your bearings again, because otherwise you might think, I haven't even got there yet, how come you're all the way here? So I'm assuming you've all got tranquility now, and we start from there. So at this point, I'd like to reiterate something that was also pointed out in Venerable Tangzi's talk a few days ago. When we practice samadhi and vipassana meditation, the object of focus, 所缘境, the object of focus in both meditation can be the one and the same thing. Now, this particular object can come from the mundane world, like the breath, so you focus on the breath, or the object can be transcendental, like the doctrine of emptiness. Now, this means that the object of focus, remember, you apply to both your samadhi practice and your vipassana practice. The difference is how you apply your mind to that object. Now, when the mind is able to just settle onto the object for an extended period of time without any distraction, and at the same time maintain clarity, awareness, calm, and the mind and body is filled with bliss and rapture, this is the mark of samadhi. So this is what you all should be now, because remember, you've all attained tranquility. Now, after attaining this tranquility, you then have to progress. You can't stay there and just bliss out. Okay? So remember my tragedy at Tokyo Disney Sea? Don't stay there. You have to move on to Vipassana practice. And more importantly, don't mistaken the clarity that exists in the state of tranquility for Vipassana. That's also very important. So, now we have to engage in Vipassana practice. Now, if your chosen object is a worldly phenomenon, like the breath, the investigation of the breath, because remember, Vipassana practice actually is not calming. You actually have to start some mental investigation. So the investigation into that object that you're focusing on can be approached from the aspect of cause and effect, dependent arising, and so on. Now these practices can extend to investigate the Buddha's magnificent physical hallmarks. Now when you've got the Buddha's hallmarks and you're investigating their meaning and purpose and so forth, this is also considered part of the mundane world. These objects are considered mundane, not transcendental. Now this type of Vipassana practices that uses worldly object can still get you to realization. You don't have to use a transcendental object. But alternatively, if you feel that it suits you better to use a transcendental object as your investigation, your purpose, then that is fine as well. Now what this means, if your object of focus is, say, the doctrine of emptiness, then what you want to do is the object directly points you to the truth, and the mind investigates this object in terms of the doctrine's true nature, or to investigate how everything intrinsically is still, with no birth or death and so on. Now in his book, The Way to Buddhahood, Venerable Ingsun actually explains in detail the practice of both Samadhi and Vipassana. And generally speaking, in order to undertake the practice of wisdom and ultimately experience emptiness, we should first come to understand how all worldly phenomena are just notional constructs. They are mere names without a truly existing or underlying essence. We need to ponder and investigate this aspect deeply until a proper understanding of emptiness and notional existence is established. Now this means we understand without a doubt that emptiness does not obstruct the conditional existence of objects, because some people get caught up with the word empty and think if it's empty, how can that thing exist? So here what Venerable Ingsun is trying to stress is we have to have a proper understanding that the doctrine on emptiness does not obstruct conditional existence of phenomena. And in the scriptures you will find that it says, although things manifest, but ultimately they are empty. Now this describes how all objects can arise from dependent origination when the right causes and conditions come together. But it is exactly because of that type of arising, there is no intrinsic essence that can be found in that compounded object. Now, this proper understanding that everything is absolutely empty of any self-nature is developed by the three wisdoms of learning, contemplation, and practice. And in the final stage of practice, there must be tranquility of the mind. Investigation of phenomena requires the mind to have a good foundation in tranquility. Otherwise, any investigation can only be considered as an observation with a scattered mind. So this means that we need to also practice meditation and then follow the sequential steps for Vipassana. So what are these sequential steps? First, after attaining tranquility and bliss, this means that right concentration has been achieved. Now, the signs and marks of tranquility are rapture and bliss that wells up inside of you, but at the same time there is clarity and awareness. So this is our starting point. So this, even though this says point number 1, there's a lot that needs to be done to get to this stage. Next, we rely on this concentration, this tranquility, to begin insight practice. Remember, the aim is to penetrate the teachings that notional existence and emptiness are mutually in harmony without conflict. In this phase, the object of focus and investigation is emptiness or no intrinsic self-nature. We first have to observe or investigate what is this nature of emptiness. Then, after investigating for a while, we should use that same object of emptiness to practice calming and settling of the mind. Now, this is because the tranquility of the mind is likely to have weakened with the activity of mental investigation. So that is why you temporarily cease your insight practice and you move back to calming and to try and re-establish tranquility. Now, this means that if you can start to get a glimpse, you're moving between the two. When you undertake insight practice, there's actually a lot of mental work going on, and therefore you can disturb the tranquility that you had. So after a while, when you also become aware that the power of that tranquility is a bit weak, you need to reinforce it again. Then, when you move between Vipassana and Samadhi practice, remember the object stays the same. What you're trying to do is to maintain a certain level of tranquility before you continue your Vipassana, your insight practices again. So in this third phase, you've already had one bout of insight practice, and you move back to tranquility, to re-establish tranquility and even make it stronger. So you should be able to guess what the fourth practice is. Yep, you move back to your insight practice. Because once you've re-established tranquility, you return to the insight practice and you continue to investigate the nature of emptiness. Now, in this way, you move between insight and tranquility practices using the same object. As your practice gets deeper and the skill of insight matures, the mind starts to enter into an even deeper and tranquil state. And this state is very pure and clear. It's just like a clear sky without any clouds or any wind at all. Then, once this maturity has been achieved, the object of focus, which originally was the doctrine of emptiness, now turns to investigate all dhammas. You investigate the characteristics until you see clearly that there is no intrinsic nature in any Dharma at all. Everything is like smoke. It's like an illusion. It manifests, we can see it, but we can't grasp it. Being able to penetrate the emptiness of all dharmas in such a way means that our practice of insight is getting close to completion. So we're almost there. And now, after you have exerted yourself through this practice, going from insight and then back to tranquility, when you get to this point where the practice of insight is about to become complete, you actually need to ease back and relax a little. And when you actually ease back and relax, the power of insight will start to cause rapture and bliss to arise in the body and mind again. And this is when insight investigation is achieved. This is the mark of its accomplishment. So it's important to remember that the attainment of tranquility and the attainment of insight are both marked by the arising of a sublime yet intense sensation of rapture and bliss that runs deep through the body and mind. So if you want to know whether you're there yet, you need to look for these signs. However, the steps continue. After this point, the practice of tranquility and insight are both accomplished, and the two should now be able to operate simultaneously. They operate in tandem. Previously, you had to let go of samadhi while you were undertaking vipassana, and vice versa, you let go of vipassana while you were undertaking samadhi. Now you should be able to undertake two simultaneously. Now in this state, insight supports tranquility and tranquility supports insight, and both concentration and wisdom are in perfect balance, and this wisdom can then penetrate very deep. Finally, even the sign and concept of emptiness dissolves away. The sign and concept of emptiness dissolves away. And this is when you skillfully enter into the nature of all dharmas that is perfectly still. This is when you experience emptiness. You go beyond duality. And this is when true prajna, true wisdom of non-discrimination arises. So in summary, Venerable Ing Sun teaches that when cultivating insight, not only do we seek to understand the object of focus, it must also enable us to develop and apply the skill of investigation, deduction, discernment and selection and so on. And from this investigation, either when you're investigating a worldly or a transcendental object, you must be able to ultimately experience the truth of emptiness. This is the true and unique nature of insight. This is in the Buddhist sense.
When we were in Buddhist college, we studied together, we are classmates. One of our teachers used a very humorous simile that I think highlights the practice quite well. He mentioned that once he was on the highway bus traveling from Taipei to another major city. He looked out the window and saw a truck and the driver was having his lunch. So you may think, eating and driving is no big deal. For those of you who may not be familiar in Taiwan, they use chopsticks. So so you can imagine one hand holding a lunchbox and the other holding chopsticks and eating. So, can you guess what was driving the truck? His feet. So, he had become so skilled with driving that he could do it with his feet. Now, to all the children watching, don't try this at home. For our purpose here, we can take this example to better understand what it means by experiencing the truth and becoming one with the truth. When we try to get our driver's license, we have to first read the handbook, learn the road rules before we can go for the learner license or examination permit. Then, when you get your examination permit, you can get into a vehicle and learn to drive with the help of an instructor to guide you. As you get more confidence, you can then go for your provisional license permit. This whole stage is like the wisdom of learning. You need to read and listen to the teachings to find out what is proper and what is not. You need to find out about remedies to deal with obstacles and so on. In this stage, you are not just a bookworm. There is some practice involved and effort needs to be put in so that you have a strong foundation going forward. Having passed the provisional driving test, you can now drive around without having someone to supervise you. But as a new driver on the road, you still need to tell yourself, step on the brake, change gear, turn on the lights, etc. This phase is like the wisdom of contemplation, trying to sort out the theories and how it applies and works in practice, and figuring out which practices are best suited to you and really investigate the methods. Once you pass your provisional stage and get your full license, that is like attaining tranquility, your skills to handle the car, which is like the scattered mind has attained to a certain level of stability, that you become quite confident with your driving skills. However, even full license holders need to continue with the practice. As you become more skilled, this motion of driving becomes like second nature. You just do it without much conscious effort. So, this is like your insight practice getting deeper. You know when to switch between tranquility and insight, and when to relax, so that you do not overexert yourself. This is like the wisdom of practice. Ultimately, you enter into the truth. It is not something you can explain, because it is something we personally experience. Just like a seasoned driver who knows how to drive in all sorts of conditions and many different types of cars, it is just a skill you possess. You become one with the truth, just like the truck driver become one with the truck. Here, it is important to point out that there are some common misunderstandings regarding meditation and wisdom. Some people have a misunderstanding when they hear the term non-discrimination. They think they should not discriminate between things because everything is empty. So, from the very start of their practice, they do not discern and think this is the way of non-discrimination. If a practitioner of the Buddha Dharma does not carry out analysis and discernment regarding phenomena and the noble teachings, then they will never be able to complete the cultivation of wisdom. Such methods of not discriminating is really just the cultivation of quietude and tranquility. So, for these practitioners, they can sit on cushion until Maitreya comes and goes and wisdom still not arise. What this means is that they may develop deep state of concentration, but they have no true wisdom. This will be like someone who got their driver's license but rarely drives a car afterwards. This is just like me. So they will have a perfect driving record. No parking fee fines, no speeding fines, but not because they are a good driver, but because they never drive. So in the same way, if you don't discern things initially, your wisdom won't improve and your practice may even regress because of an overemphasis on tranquility or even even mistaking tranquility for nirvana. Buddhist meditation requires the development of a mind that not only possesses tranquility and clarity, the mind must also be able to properly investigate, discern, and experience the truth of all Dharma while maintaining the state of tranquility and clarity. This marks the achievement in the practice of insights. This was the explanation the Buddha gave to Maitreya and other Bodhisattvas when teaching them about the state of tranquility and insights.
Now, another common misunderstanding is the mix-up between the training of tranquility and the training of wisdom. So in the table, what I've tried to show you, within the Sravakayana practice, there is the 3 progressive trainings, and you have the progressive training of meditation and the separate progressive training of wisdom. Now within the Mahayana practice, there are the 6 paramitas, and I've grouped the first 4 paramitas together just to highlight that there is a paramita of dhyana and then a distinct paramita of prajna. Now from the perspective of a beginner on the path, undertaking the practice consists of both tranquility and insight. However, we must make clear the two are not the same. It is always the case that training of tranquility forms the foundation for the cultivation of wisdom, and yet the training of wisdom is not the same as the training of tranquility. Therefore, we need to pay careful attention to the training of wisdom in our practice, particularly in the development of our understanding. Now, at the same time, we must not neglect the methods for cultivating tranquility and meditation as well. So we have to remember the two are separate and they are important. The Chinese teachings contain a common saying: with morality, tranquility arises. With tranquility, wisdom is initiated. Now from this teaching, some people literally think that if meditation is accomplished, then wisdom will just naturally arise. Now this is a total misunderstanding. Similarly, would you agree that purely by upholding the precepts, then you've attained tranquility? No, this is not the case. To attain meditation requires accomplishing the practices that lead to the development of concentration. And a key practice that supports it is pure conduct. Now similarly, the attainment of meditation does not automatically give rise to wisdom. However, it does form the foundation for developing wisdom. So they are related, but it's not automatic. Now, the process of initiating wisdom relies on the practice of insight, which in turn must be supported by the power of meditation or tranquility. Now, when the teachings say tranquility, with tranquility, wisdom is initiated, it does not mean that once meditation is accomplished, wisdom will just pop out of nowhere. If this was the case, then other spiritual practitioners who have also attained to these states of deep meditation or tranquility should also be liberated. But they are not. And that is because only the Buddha's teachings have the unique quality of wisdom, and it is this wisdom, this prajna, that ultimately unlocks the door to liberation. So in this particular teaching on wisdom, Venerable Yingsun goes into much more detail, but for now, we'll draw this talk to a close. And what I'd like to do here is just to have a quick wrap-up because of the time span, just to jog your memory a bit. Now in this teaching, first we tried to understand the Buddhist wisdom and why it's unique, and then why it is the key to attaining liberation. So we should always be aware that in Buddhism we need to cultivate wisdom. It's not an option, basically. Sooner or later we need to cultivate wisdom if we want to follow the Buddhist path. Now, to cultivate wisdom starts from learning extensively, following a good teacher, and building up our capacity to contemplate and practice. Now, in the practice, we have to develop tranquility, and then we can begin insight practice. So there's a proper sequence to be followed. Now, from the 4 characteristics of wisdom, we can check to ensure that the wisdom is the right wisdom the Buddha wanted us to develop. So remember, the 4 are: faith and wisdom functions as one. There's a merger between wisdom and great compassion. There's a balance between tranquility and wisdom, and there should be the sameness of the truth and wisdom. So we hope that the key messages you pick up from Venerable Yingsun's teachings today is that in order to realize prajna, it must come from learning, contemplation, and then practice. It is not something that the Buddhas can give to us like a birthday present. In fact, if we want to accomplish the other virtues that are spoken of in the Buddha Dharma, it all follows the same process. We must rely on the teachings of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. Then we must contemplate and investigate the teachings to discern what is true and what is false, and to understand their underlying meaning. Then once we know it well, we have to practice. If we don't, we cannot accomplish that virtue. And in the case of prajna, it is imperative that we follow these steps of learning, contemplation, and practice. So that draws the talk to a close. Did you still want QA? No? Okay. So we'd like to end now with the dedication of merits, and because this talk is in English, so we'll do the dedication of merits in English as well. So if you can all put your palms together and repeat after me.
I dedicate the accumulated merits to all sentient beings.
Sorry. I dedicate the accumulated merits to all sentient beings. May we all be able to realize the noble path to Buddhahood. Thank you for your attention.
大众请起立。礼佛三问讯：一问讯，再问讯，三问讯。向两位授课法师问讯。阿弥陀佛，谢谢师父。